it's Aimee here. This video will be a bit different than my usual video. This month is Stroke Awareness Month, and I realize that it's a bit late in the month to be posting this, but I felt a bit vulnerable when retelling this story. However, it's important for people, especially those who are younger, to be aware of the signs and to know that it can happen to anyone, young and old. I will be redrawing a piece that I did in 2017 for the third time. It was a drawing I did 9 months after my stroke. This is my story. I was visiting my family for 2 weeks. On June 11th, 2016, it was a bit of a stressful day. I had to quickly pack up my stuff to go to the airport, and I had very little time to do it. I went to use my laptop really fast to turn it off, and my mind went blank. I don't remember my password. It felt like it was on the tip of my tongue, but it didn't come back to me. My family tried to ask me questions to help, but then I realized I didn't know how to respond. It felt like there were words in my head, but I couldn't think of them. Like there was a wall that stopped them from coming out. Concerned, my dad took me to the hospital. On the way, I started having a splitting headache. I still couldn't speak or think of anything. Once we got there, the nurses started to ask me the usual questions, my name, my date of birth, etc., but I couldn't answer any of them. I was so confused. I didn't know any of the answers to them. My dad had to be the one to tell them. The details were a bit blurry, but I think I remember pointing to my head when they asked me if something hurt. They took me to the back and we waited for the doctor to get some answers. The doctor came in and asked me the same questions that the nurses gave me. I don't remember if I could answer any questions at that point, but I think the only thing I did was give the same information to the doctor, that my head hurt. The doctor gave me some painkillers and I slept it off for a while. I couldn't tell you how long that I slept for, but when I woke up, it was like nothing happened. My head didn't hurt as bad and I was finally coherent. The doctor came back in to check up on me and asked me what happened. I told him that I started having a headache and was very confused. The doctor couldn't comprehend why I was confused, and I felt like he kind of brushed that part aside. I had a stomach flu a couple days prior, and he just attributed it to that and said I probably had a brain virus. I didn't know any better and just accepted that as fact. He told me to take some ibuprofen whenever I had a headache and to return if it doesn't get any better. I went home and got some rest, waiting to see if it'll get better. A couple days later, on Monday, June 13th, I continued to have unexplained headaches. They weren't horrible, but they weren't getting any better without medication either. I probably wouldn't have gone to the emergency room again, but since the doctor told me to return if they didn't go away, that's what I did. I can't remember exactly what happened that day, as it wasn't really eventful, and I believe they told me to continue taking ibuprofen for the headaches. I didn't take any tests and I didn't get any other advice, so I moved on with my day and waited until I had to get on the flight for Thursday. The next day, everything was still the same. I continued to take medicine for the headaches and just hoped that they would go away. The day went on, and at night, I had a regular conversation with my brothers, probably about games or something. Then, in the middle of the conversation, I had trouble talking again. I told them I was really tired and needed some rest. It was like what happened to me last Saturday, but I don't think it was that bad. I just thought that maybe some rest will help it go away. I tossed and turned all night. I remember my mom helping me throughout the night because I just had a hard time sleeping and I don't really remember why. The next morning, I couldn't feel my arm. It felt like my arm was detached from my body because even though I could still see it, it didn't feel like it was where it's supposed to be. Still, I just thought it would go away on its own. My husband was at our home, states away from where my parents lived. So I was telling him how everything was okay over here through texts, but it wasn't. I thought my texts were coherent, but to my husband, it was gibberish. He called me on the phone to ask how I was doing. I told him I was fine, but being the paramedic that he was, he knew something was off. He called for an ambulance from where he was, states away from me. I was actually annoyed with him, believe it or not, because I thought I was fine and it wasn't a big deal. Even the paramedics who picked me up didn't seem concerned. Or maybe they were, but the lights and sirens weren't going off, so I figured everything was okay. I thought they assumed I was on illegal substances or just loopy because they kept asking me the question over and over again. I arrived at the same emergency room that I visited the past 2 times and was seen by the same doctor who saw me the last time again. He had me do some tests, like I put my arms out to the side like I was an airplane and to point to my nose, alternating each hand as I do it. I did it perfectly on my left side. My right hand was on my forehead, on my cheek, everywhere but my nose. There were some other tests that he had me to do, and it was concerning enough for him to get my head scanned. I didn't understand what was happening to me, but I still didn't think anything of it. It will go away, surely. No need to worry. The doctor came back in to tell me the results. I had a stroke. The clot was so large that it caused some bleeding in my head. And even with that information at that moment, I didn't think it was that bad. I had to be transferred to a different hospital as this one didn't have a facility for long-term stay. Everything went downhill from there. My symptoms got worse. I couldn't walk straight and I couldn't feed myself properly. I couldn't speak properly as the words either didn't come to my head or they didn't make any sense. I felt hopeless, lost, scared that I was going to die. My husband flew in the next day, and a lot of those feelings melted away. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and my husband was there through it all, taking care of me and keeping me positive. I honestly just felt a roller coaster of emotions, because sometimes I felt like, oh, this isn't too bad, and then other times I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks. Even with all of that, I still felt like it was something that would just go away quickly. I really didn't understand how bad the situation was until months later, but how could I? I did a lot of therapy to function with my right arm again. I was slowly gaining control of it, and in reality, my recovery was fairly quick. I can't remember how long exactly it took me, but I know it was at least a month until I could use my right side normally again. The question that everyone was trying to solve was, why did it happen? I was 21 and perfectly healthy. I exercised regularly and I felt like I had a proper diet. I did as much as I could to take care of myself. The only thing they found was a blood clotting mutation that increased my chances of blood clots, and birth control, which also had a side effect of increased blood clots. I thought it was the end of it. Until a month after my diagnosis, I was admitted to the hospital again. They scanned my head and told me there was a possible second stroke. I didn't know how to feel about it. I didn't have any symptoms other than a mental breakdown, so what is going on with me? I got discharged after 5 days in the hospital and was still trying to figure out how to manage the healing process. Even with my right side functioning, my mind was still in need of care. My speech was a bit slowed, and it sometimes made me feel like I was not the brightest. That was when I started therapy to manage the depression it caused me. Another couple months went by, and everything seemed to be okay. My speech is getting better, my stamina is improving, my mental health is not as bad as it was. Until, again, another episode. Confusion, right-sided numbness, speech difficulty, everything that happened before. I was immediately taken to the hospital and had my head scanned once again to figure out what was happening. but nothing showed up. There were no signs of a stroke. In fact, it only showed some scar tissue and that my brain is pretty much healed. So what the heck, right? I had multiple appointments with a neurologist to get answers, and the conclusion was migraines. Every time I have a migraine, these symptoms will reoccur, and they still do to this day. Even though I'm stable, I can't overwork myself. If I do, symptoms, lack of sleep, symptoms. It's scary and annoying every time, especially when I'm in the middle of a conversation with someone. I have to explain to them what happened afterwards, and it's embarrassing. I feel dumb every time. If the stroke was caught earlier, who knows if this would even be my life now. I probably wouldn't have some of these issues that I have now, but unfortunately, I have a constant reminder with my migraines, and I just have to live with it. This is why it is so important to not brush off health issues. Look for the signs, either in yourself or in others, and the best way to remember is this acronym: B FAST. B for balance, E for eyes, F for face, A for arms, S for speech, and T for time. If you experience lack of balance, blurry vision, have a drooping face, numbness in your arms or legs, and/or your speech is off, it is time to call an ambulance. If you see any of these signs in others, call for an ambulance. The faster you catch it, the faster you recover. I was young, I was ignorant, I felt invincible until this happened. Young or old, it is always possible, so please don't ignore it like I did. If you made it this far, thank you for hearing my story. If you are a stroke survivor, know that you are not alone in your pain and struggles. My heart truly goes out to those who have someone in their life struggling or are no longer with us. Please take care of yourself.